At my daughter's wedding, she kicked me out when I refused to gift her my house, but my truth crushed the whole party. "If you don't want to see your daughter happy, then you shouldn't be here," Lily hissed, her white satin wedding dress catching the light from the crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. The reception hall fell silent around us as nearby guests pretended not to hear my own daughter dismissing me from her wedding. Without hesitation, I stood up from our table, tucked in the corner, and walked away, my chin raised, my spine straight, despite the knife twisting in my heart. What the 200 guests filling that luxurious Connecticut venue didn't know was that I wasn't leaving the building. I was positioning myself strategically at the back of the room, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what my daughter had done to our family. The grand ballroom of the Westfield Hall vibrated with music and laughter, silver and crystal gleaming on perfectly arranged tables. From my position at the rear, I could see everything: the towering wedding cake, the champagne fountain, the dance floor where my daughter twirled in her husband's arms. I watched Lily dance with her new husband, Anderson Reynolds, his polished smile charming everyone around him as he moved confidently in his custom-tailored tuxedo. His hand rested possessively on the small of my daughter's back, his eyes occasionally scanning the room as if assessing its value. I saw my husband, Charles, sitting alone at our banished table, his shoulders slumped with defeat, absently turning his wedding ring. We had been made invisible at our own daughter's wedding, relegated to table 15, hidden behind a column, as far from the head table as possible. After 30 years building a company that employed over 300 people, after sacrificing vacations and weekends to secure our children's futures, we had been tucked away like embarrassing relatives no one wanted to acknowledge. The waiter who had been attentively serving the head table hadn't even bothered to refill our water glasses. Our place cards had been handwritten, unlike the elegant calligraphy used for the other guests. The message couldn't have been clearer if Lily had posted a sign, "The Parkers are unwelcome." I'd given Charles a gentle squeeze on his arm before walking away. "Wait for me in the car," I'd whispered, noting how his bow tie had come slightly undone, how the hurt in his eyes had aged him 10 years in a single evening. But I had no intention of joining him yet, not until I'd finished what needed to be done. The band finished their set with a flourish of jazz trumpets, announcing they'd take a 15-minute break. I saw my opportunity emerging like the parting of clouds. With steady steps, I approached the stage, my heart pounding against my ribs, but my resolve unshakable. The satin of my navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress whispered against my legs as I moved through the crowd, invisible until I wasn't. As I took the microphone from its stand, 200 pairs of eyes turned to me in shock. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to parted lips. In the sudden silence, I could hear the soft clinking of ice in water glasses and the distant sound of kitchen staff behind the service doors. "The betrayal didn't begin today," I announced, my voice echoing through the suddenly silent hall, carrying to every corner with unexpected strength. "It began the day my daughter sold out her own family." In the front of the room, Lily's face transformed from laughing bride to fury in an instant. Anderson's practiced smile faltered, his eyes darting toward the exit doors. But it was too late for either of them to stop what I had set in motion. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 6 months earlier, our family had gathered for dinner at our home on Beacon Hill to meet Anderson for the first time. The dining room gleamed with polished silver and the antique china that had been my grandmother's wedding gift. Outside, snow fell gently on Boston, turning our carefully maintained garden into a winter wonderland. Charles had opened a bottle of Chateau Margaux 1995, a vintage we'd been saving for a special occasion. Charles and I had built Parker Logistics from nothing in 1990, working initially from our garage with a single delivery van and a landline phone. Through 3 decades of disciplined work, strategic decisions, and many sleepless nights, we'd transformed it into a respected national company with offices in 12 states. Our home reflected that success, spacious but tasteful, filled with memories of raising 3 children, the walls lined with photographs documenting family milestones against backdrops of increasing prosperity. "To family," Charles toasted, raising his glass. At 60, his hair had gone silver at the temples, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had guided our company through recessions and market shifts. "And to new beginnings." Lily beamed as she guided Anderson around the room, her hand possessively on his arm. At 27, she had her father's height and my determination, her business degree from Wharton proudly displayed in our family room alongside her brother's achievements. "Everyone, this is Anderson," she announced proudly as he shook hands with Daniel and Michael. "He works in international finance." Anderson moved through the room with practiced charm, his grip firm as he shook hands, his laughter coming easily at Charles's jokes. His tailored suit and precisely knotted tie spoke of attention to detail, his Italian leather shoes reflecting the soft lighting. When he reached Charles, he lingered. "I've heard so much about Parker Logistics," he said, his voice carrying just the right amount of admiration. "The Asian expansion must be an exciting challenge. Breaking into those markets takes real vision." Charles, always eager to discuss business, nodded enthusiastically. "It's our biggest move yet. The Singapore hub will be operational by next quarter." I noticed how Anderson's eyes lingered on the family photos displaying our vacation homes in Cape Cod and Vermont, the visible signs of our success. While Daniel discussed the Red Sox chances with his wife and Michael helped his son with a puzzle, I observed Anderson's calculating gaze surveying our possessions, taking silent inventory. As I served coffee and my homemade apple tart, Lily circled the table, topping off wine glasses. "Mom makes the best desserts," she told Anderson. "One of her many hidden talents." "I'd love to hear more about how you built the company," Anderson said to Charles. "Starting from scratch and expanding nationally, that's the American dream right there." Later, as I cleared dishes in the kitchen, Daniel appeared at my elbow, his voice low and concerned. At 35, my oldest had his father's analytical mind and my caution. "Mom, there's something off about that guy," he whispered, glancing toward the dining room where Anderson was charming Michael's wife with stories of his travels. "I've seen him before, at a logistics conference in Singapore last year. He was using a different name." I rinsed a plate, dismissing Daniel's concerns with a shake of my head. "You're just being protective. Lily has always said we favor you boys." "This isn't about favoritism," Daniel insisted, his hand on my arm. "Just keep your eyes open. Something doesn't add up." As Anderson helped Lily into her coat at the end of the evening, his smile seemed genuine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something calculating lurked behind his warm expressions, something predatory, waiting for the right moment to strike. 3 months before the wedding, I noticed disturbing changes in Lily's behavior. My once open daughter, who had called me daily since college, began canceling our weekly lunch dates with last-minute excuses. When she did appear at family gatherings, she arrived late and left early, her attention constantly diverted by text messages that made her smile secretly at her phone. She spent increasing time at the company's financial office, though she'd previously shown little interest in the day-to-day operations. Most troublingly, she started making dismissive comments about the family business's outdated model and limited vision. "Parker Logistics needs to modernize," she declared during Sunday dinner, picking at her food rather than eating it. "The European and Asian markets are evolving faster than we're adapting." Charles frowned, setting down his fork. "We've been in business for 30 years, Lily. Our approach has weathered recessions and market shifts." "That's exactly the problem," she countered, a new edge in her voice. "You're still operating like it's the 90s. Anderson says companies that don't transform get left behind." "Anderson says," I repeated quietly, noting how frequently this phrase had entered my daughter's vocabulary. The tension broke when my phone chimed with a timer. The chocolate soufflé was ready. As I served dessert, I watched Lily texting under the table, her wedding planning binder open but neglected beside her plate. Later that week, we hosted a dinner for potential international partners. Anderson attended as Lily's fiancé, immaculately dressed and immediately at ease among executives twice his age. As coffee was served, he steered the conversation toward our expansion plans. "I heard you're bidding for that major project in Asia," he commented casually, stirring a single cube of sugar into his espresso. "Must be a multi-million-dollar operation, right? The shipping routes alone would require significant restructuring." Daniel, now our operations director, skillfully changed the subject, but I noticed how Anderson's questions had extracted specific details about contract timelines and margins. His casual inquiries had mapped our entire strategy by dessert. The following Tuesday, Daniel arrived at my office unannounced, closing the door firmly behind him. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. "Mom, I hired someone to look into Anderson. I know it seems extreme, but my gut wouldn't let this go." He placed a manila folder on my desk. "He has an offshore company called West Stream Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands last year. 3 guesses who's competing against us for the Asian bid." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos of Anderson entering the offices of our main competitor, financial records of Weststream Holdings, and most disturbingly, evidence they had submitted a bid for our Asian project with details suspiciously similar to our proprietary strategy. How would he get enough information to compete with us? I asked, my stomach sinking with the answer I already suspected. Daniel placed another document before me, system access logs showing Lily's credentials being used to download confidential files repeatedly after hours, including our pricing strategies, client proposals, and proprietary routing algorithms. There's more, Daniel said quietly, his voice heavy. I think you should visit Lily's apartment when she's not expecting you. The next morning, I called Lily with the excuse of needing photographs for a wedding slideshow. Her apartment in Back Bay reflected her success as our company's finance director. Modern furniture, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. Everything meticulously arranged, just like Lily herself. I have most of the childhood photos digitized already, she said, gesturing toward a sleek laptop on her coffee table. Let me find the folder. As she scrolled through images, her phone rang. Glancing at the screen, she stood quickly. I need to take this. Help yourself to coffee. I'll just be a minute. She disappeared into her bedroom, closing the door. I could hear her voice, hushed but animated. I glanced at her laptop, still open on the table. The photo folder was minimized, revealing her desktop. A folder labeled Weststream sat prominently among her documents. My heart pounding, I clicked it open. Inside were dozens of Parker Logistics documents, confidential contracts, pricing strategies, client lists, shipping manifests, even the proprietary algorithm Charles had developed for route optimization. Some files had been modified, margins adjusted, company name changed, but they were unmistakably our documents. With shaking hands, I took photos with my phone as evidence, my mind racing to find some innocent explanation. When I heard Lily's bedroom door open, I quickly closed the folder and returned to the photo application. Sorry about that, she said brightly, settling beside me on the sofa. Wedding vendor crisis averted. I smiled thinly, noticing how she angled the laptop slightly away from me. Lily, what's in that Weststream folder? Her face paled momentarily before her expression hardened. You were snooping through my computer? How dare you? Answer the question, I said, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. It's research, she snapped, for a side project Anderson and I are working on. Research or theft? I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken. These are confidential Parker Logistics documents. This one has your father's digital signature still on it. After denials and deflections, her composure finally cracked. She stood, pacing her immaculate living room like a caged animal. You and Dad always favored my brothers, she exploded, years of perceived slights pouring out. Daniel got the beach mansion in Cape Cod. Michael got the lake house in Vermont. And what do I get? Empty promises that my turn will come. Your brothers earned their gifts by contributing to the family business, I replied, remaining seated, keeping my voice level. Daniel worked in the warehouse during college breaks. Michael drove delivery trucks before getting his MBA. Not by stealing from it. Lily's laugh was bitter, her eyes flashing. Earned, please. They got handed executive positions because they're men. I have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. You were made financial director at 25, Lily, hardly overlooked. She dismissed this with a wave of her hand. A glorified accountant. Anderson believes in my potential. He says we can build something 10 times bigger than Parker Logistics. Using our own documents against us, I said. That's not business, Lily. It's betrayal. It's corporate espionage. It's the future, Mom, she replied coldly, her chin lifting in defiance. And you just lost your invitation to my wedding. That night, I called an emergency family meeting at our home, excluding Lily. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder rolled across Boston, nature's percussion matching the storm brewing inside our family room. Charles was devastated when I showed him the evidence. His blood pressure rose so dangerously that he needed his medication. His hands shook as he examined the screenshots of our company's most confidential documents found on his daughter's computer. How could she do this? He whispered, his voice breaking. After everything we've built for her? Daniel pounded the mahogany dining table, his law degree and protective instincts converging in righteous anger. We need to call the police immediately. This is corporate espionage, plain and simple. She's still your sister, Michael reminded him, always the peacemaker. His wife nodded beside him, her hand protectively covering her pregnant belly. There must be another explanation. The explanation is that Anderson manipulated her, Charles said, rubbing his temples. He saw our company as a target and used our daughter to get what he wanted. Lily is 27 years old, I reminded him gently. She made her choices. She knew exactly what she was doing. Michael leaned forward, his engineer's mind already seeking solutions. What if we feed them false information? Use this against them? We could create bogus projections? Fabricated client lists? No, I said firmly, setting my teacup down with a decisive clink. We're not playing their game. We're going to handle this the right way. I outlined my plan, a three-pronged approach to protect the company. Gather more evidence and give Lily one last chance to come to her senses before the wedding. Charles and the boys reluctantly agreed, though Daniel insisted on consulting our corporate attorney the next morning. Later, alone in our bedroom with the storm still raging outside, Charles sat heavily on the edge of our bed, loosening his tie with trembling fingers. "Where did we go wrong with her, Eleanor?" he asked, the question hanging in the darkness between us. What did we miss? I had no answer. I could only move to our closet and pull out the old photo albums from the top shelf. Together we paged through images of Lily growing up, her first steps, dance recitals, graduation. Always determined, always wanting more, never satisfied with what she had. "Remember how she negotiated her allowance when she was 9? Charles said, a sad smile playing on his lips. Presented us with a chart showing what her friends received. And the time she traded her Christmas presents with her cousin because his were more expensive," I added. "She's always had this hunger." The rain drummed against our windows as we continued through the years. Teenage Lily rolling her eyes when we couldn't afford the designer jeans her friends wore. College Lily demanding a newer car because her roommate's father had given her a BMW. "We gave her everything we could," Charles said softly. It was never enough. The sudden jangling of the phone cut through our reflections. I checked the caller ID, Lily. My finger hovered over the answer button as I exchanged glances with Charles. Taking a deep breath, I accepted the call. "Is it true?" she demanded without preamble, her voice tight with anger. "Have you removed me from the wedding house list?" "We're reconsidering all wedding arrangements in light of recent discoveries," I replied carefully. "You promised me that beach house as a wedding gift," she hissed. "Daniel got his, Michael got his. It's my right." "Your brothers didn't betray the family," I responded, keeping my voice steady. "They didn't steal proprietary information to undermine the company that pays your salary. So that's it? You're going to punish your only daughter for trying to build her future?" Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment I heard the little girl who had once sought my approval in everything. "No, Lily," I said softly. "I'm protecting the family you decided to attack." One day before the wedding, I visited Lily at the Four Seasons Hotel where she was staying with her bridesmaids. The hotel lobby bustled with wedding vendors delivering flowers and last-minute preparations. The wedding planner, whom we were paying $15,000, barely acknowledged me as I passed. "Mrs. Parker?" The concierge nodded respectfully. "Miss Parker is in the presidential suite. Shall I announce you?" The suite was a flurry of activity. Makeup artists arranging their palettes, bridesmaids in matching silk robes taking selfies, champagne bottles and ice buckets. Lily, sitting by the window while a stylist arranged her hair, looked up in surprise when I entered. "Mom, I didn't expect you." Her tone was guarded, but I detected a hint of hope beneath it. "I need to speak with you, privately." After dismissing her entourage with practiced authority, Lily followed me to the hotel's garden terrace. Spring flowers bloomed in carefully arranged planters, the air fresh after yesterday's storm. We sat at a wrought iron table, two women who shared blood but seemed unable to understand each other. "I appreciate you coming," Lily said, smoothing her silk robe. "Does this mean you've reconsidered the house?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, trying to see past the expensive highlights, the perfect manicure, the entitled tilt of her chin. Somewhere beneath the polished exterior was the child who had once run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. "It's not too late to fix this, Lily," I said gently. "End things with Anderson. Return the documents. We can work through this as a family." She stared at me incredulously. "End things? The day before my wedding? Are you insane? Anderson is using you to get to our company. The investigation we've conducted shows a pattern. He's done this before." "Investigation?" She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Of course. You still don't understand, do you? I don't want to be fixed. I want what's mine by right." "The beach house was never yours," I explained calmly, folding my hands on the table. "It was a conditional gift, like it was for your brothers, based on loyalty and contribution to the family." "Loyalty?" she sneered, the word dripping with contempt. You kept me in my brother's shadow for years. Daniel runs operations, Michael manages logistics, and me, I just handle financial reports. Because you never showed interest in anything but the money, I replied sadly. Your brothers started in the warehouse, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. You refused summer jobs there, calling the work beneath you. Well, you got what you wanted, Lily snapped. I've finally taken an interest in the family business. Our conversation was interrupted when Lily's phone rang. The screen displayed A with a heart emoji. She answered immediately, turning slightly away from me. Hey, everything okay? Her voice softened automatically. Yes, we're still on schedule. No, the deposit went through. They didn't? Let me call them right away. I listened, piecing together that they were discussing the Asian bid, using our stolen information at that very moment. As she spoke, I noticed the diamond on her finger catching the light. 3 carats at least, far more expensive than Anderson's supposed finance job would allow. When she hung up, I delivered my ultimatum, my voice firm but quiet. You'll have your wedding. You'll have your guests, but you will not have our house. Lily's eyes flashed with fury, her cheeks flushing with anger. You'll regret this. Tomorrow, in front of all your friends and business associates, I'll show everyone what kind of mother you really are. As I stood to leave, she called after me, her voice suddenly vulnerable. So, you're coming to the wedding? I turned, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm your mother, Lily. I'll always show up, even when it's hard, even when it breaks my heart. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Charles, and padded downstairs to my home office. Outside, Boston slept under a canopy of stars, the city lights twinkling like earthbound constellations. I unlocked the hidden safe behind a painting of Cape Cod, where Daniel's wedding gift house stood overlooking the Atlantic, and removed a red leather folder I hadn't opened in years. Charles was always the public face of our company, I whispered to myself, running my fingers over the embossed Parker Logistics logo. Few people know I structured our most important contracts, planned our biggest victories. Inside were the original business plans in my handwriting, agreements with our first clients, and the strategy documents that had transformed a single delivery van into a national logistics company. While Charles spoke at industry conferences and graced the covers of business magazines, I had worked behind the scenes, designing the systems and relationships that made Parker Logistics successful. I called Daniel at 3:30 a.m., knowing my meticulous son would answer regardless of the hour. Mom? His voice was instantly alert. What's wrong? I need those surveillance photos from your investigator, I said without preamble, and I want complete access to Weststream's transaction history. Now? It's the middle of the night. The wedding is tomorrow, Daniel. We're running out of time. 2 hours later, showered and dressed in a crisp pantsuit, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the additional evidence Daniel had sent over. The coffee had grown cold beside me as I pieced together the full extent of Anderson and Lily's scheme. Weststream Holdings had been incorporated precisely 1 week after Anderson and Lily's first date. Bank transfers showed regular payments from the company to Lily's personal account, coded as consulting fees. Email exchanges between them discussed specific Parker Logistics clients they planned to poach once the Asian contract was secured. On the morning of the wedding, while Charles dressed somberly in his tuxedo for the 2 p.m. ceremony, I slipped out for a private meeting with Mr. Jameson from the Securities Commission at a cafe 3 blocks from our home. I don't want to ruin my daughter's wedding, I explained, sliding a thumb drive across the table alongside a folder of printed evidence. But I need you there as a witness to what might unfold. Jameson, a serious man in his 60s who had worked with our company for decades, reviewed the documents with a professional detachment that didn't quite mask his shock. This is substantial, Eleanor, he said finally, closing the folder. Enough for a formal investigation. I'm not asking for arrests at the ceremony, I clarified. Just be present, watch, and be prepared to act, if necessary. On the way to St. Thomas Church, Michael called with surprising news. Weststream had unexpectedly withdrawn their bid for the Asian contract hours earlier. The client had contacted Parker Logistics directly, selecting our proposal. What did you do, Mom? Michael asked, his tone a mixture of confusion and admiration. Just leveled the playing field, I answered cryptically, watching Boston's historic buildings pass by as Charles drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The spring air was fragrant with cherry blossoms as we arrived at the church, elegant cars lining the street outside. Guests in designer suits and fascinators greeted each other warmly, air-kissing and exclaiming over the beautiful weather. Charles and I walked up the stone steps together, his hand steady at the small of my back. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured as we reached the ornate wooden doors. I nodded, squeezing his arm gently. Some lessons are learned the hard way, even by our children. St. Thomas Church was filled with Boston's high society, bank executives, real estate developers, old money families whose names graced university buildings and hospital wings. The Gothic arches soared overhead, light streaming through stained glass windows and casting colorful patterns across marble floors. The usher, one of Anderson's fraternity brothers, led us not to the front pew reserved for the bride's family, but to seats in the 5th row, behind distant cousins and Lily's college roommates. Another clear message. Charles started to protest, but I placed a calming hand on his arm. "Not now," I whispered. "This isn't about seating arrangements." Throughout the ceremony, I observed Anderson carefully. Though he maintained his camera-ready smile, he checked his phone repeatedly when he thought no one was looking, his eyes darting nervously to the church entrance several times. Something wasn't going according to plan. Lily was undeniably beautiful in her designer gown, its cathedral train extending 6 feet behind her as she glided down the aisle. The diamonds at her throat, a gift from Anderson's family, she'd claimed, caught the light with every breath. Her smile never quite reached her eyes as she recited her vows, promising to love and honor a man who had already betrayed her trust in ways she couldn't imagine. When the priest asked if anyone knew of any reason why this couple should not be joined in matrimony, there was a moment of tension. Several guests glanced in my direction, clearly expecting the dramatic interruption the mother of the bride had been hinting at in trembling phone calls. I remained silent, my plan requiring patience. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest declared, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. "You may kiss the bride." As applause filled the church, I noticed Mr. Jameson from the Securities Commission slipping into a seat near the back, right on schedule. The reception at Westfield Hall was a monument to extravagance. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, an 8-piece orchestra, centerpieces of imported orchids. The 5-tier wedding cake stood taller than some of the children present, its sugar flowers handcrafted by a pastry chef flown in from Paris. All paid for, of course, by Charles and me. Lily had insisted on the best, and we'd agreed months before discovering her betrayal. Eleanor and Charles Parker were placed at table 15, the furthest from the head table, behind a large column that partially obscured our view of the dance floor. The table settings matched the others, but the guests seated with us were clearly the leftovers. Elderly relatives with hearing aids, a drunk college friend, a colleague's awkward teenage son. Nobody from the immediate family sat with us, not even Michael's wife or Daniel's husband. The meticulous planning of our humiliation was obvious, not a detail overlooked. The place cards at our table were handwritten rather than calligraphed. The centerpiece was smaller. Even the chairs seemed slightly less comfortable. I noticed pitying glances from old family friends as they took in our positioning. Some approached with uncomfortable greetings, champagne clutched in manicured hands, perfume wafting as they leaned in for air kisses. "Lily mentioned you're having financial problems," one whispered sympathetically, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "That you couldn't even give her a proper wedding gift." "Such a shame about the beach house," another murmured. Anderson had already hired an architect to renovate. The false narrative was circulating throughout the hall. The Parkers were bankrupt, had refused to help their daughter out of bitterness, were being pushed out of the business they'd founded. Guests whispered behind programs, eyes darting to our isolated table before quickly looking away. Charles's face flushed with anger as he overheard the rumors. "This is outrageous," he muttered, his fist clenching around his water glass. "We should leave." I covered his hand with mine, feeling the tension in his fingers. "Not yet," I said quietly. "Trust me." As the sun set outside, casting golden light through the hall's floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched Lily and Anderson work the room like politicians. They moved from table to table, accepting congratulations and gifts, their practiced smiles never faltering. Anderson seemed to have recovered his composure, though his eyes still occasionally darted to the entrance. "He doesn't know the Securities Commission is already here," I observed quietly to Charles. "He's waiting for someone else." Charles raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did you do, Eleanor?" Before I could answer, the orchestra finished their set, and the MC announced it was time for speeches. The time for speeches arrived like the calm before a storm. The lights dimmed slightly as the MC tapped the microphone, calling for everyone's attention. Champagne glasses were refilled as guests settled into their chairs, anticipating the usual parade of heartfelt tributes and embarrassing anecdotes. Anderson's best man, a tanned investment banker with 2 white teeth, took the stage first. He told stories of their college days, carefully edited to remove the more scandalous episodes, and made jokes about Anderson's brilliant future in the business world. To know Anderson is to know ambition, he concluded, raising his glass. He doesn't just dream big, he makes those dreams reality, whatever it takes. Lily, you've got yourself a man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. The irony wasn't lost on me. Next came the maid of honor, Lily's sorority sister, who praised my daughter for finally emerging from her family's shadow to shine on her own. Lily was always meant for greatness, she gushed, her voice slightly slurred from too much champagne. She just needed someone who recognized her potential instead of holding her back. To Lily and Anderson, the power couple we've all been waiting for. Charles's knuckles whitened around his glass. I placed my hand over his, silently urging patience. Then Anderson himself took the microphone, straightening his designer tie as he surveyed the room with practiced confidence. His perfect smile revealed teeth as expensive as they were straight. First, I want to thank Charles and Eleanor for their contribution to this celebration, he said, his slight pause communicating volumes. Several guests exchanged knowing glances, the rumors about our financial troubles seemingly confirmed. But today isn't about the past, he continued smoothly. It's about the future Lily and I are building together. He paused for effect, his timing as calculated as everything else about him. In fact, we're excited to share that we've just closed an international partnership that will take our new venture to heights the previous generation only dreamed of. Surprised looks passed between executives present, many of whom worked with Parker Logistics or sat on our board. The implication was clear. Anderson was declaring victory over our family company, announcing his triumph before he'd even changed out of his wedding tuxedo. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the inappropriate timing of such a declaration. Others leaned forward, hungry for the drama unfolding before them. Lily took the microphone next, kissing Anderson's cheek before turning to face the room. In her white gown and diamond tiara, she looked every inch the princess she'd always wanted to be. Her voice was sweet, but carried an unmistakable note of vengeance. "We want to thank everyone for being here today," she began, her smile tight at the edges. "Even those who couldn't find it in their hearts to truly celebrate our union." Her gaze traveled across the room to land directly on me, her eyes hard, despite the smile fixed on her face. "Let's toast to the woman who always preferred her sons to me," she continued, raising her crystal champagne flute. "The woman who couldn't even give her daughter a wedding gift after giving houses to my brothers." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the hall. Some guests stared at their plates, embarrassed to witness such a public airing of family grievances. Others leaned forward, hungry for the spectacle. Charles started to stand, his face flushed with fury, but I placed my hand firmly on his arm. "Let her finish," I whispered. "This is important." Lily's voice grew stronger, emboldened by the attention. "But it doesn't matter. Anderson and I will build our own legacy, greater than anything Parker Logistics ever dreamed of." She raised her glass higher. "To the future, bigger, better, and without limitations." As applause scattered uncertainly around the room, I stood calmly and walked toward the exit. From the corner of my eye, I saw relief wash over Lily's face. Guests exchanged glances, assuming I was leaving in humiliation, unable to bear my daughter's public rebuke. "Eleanor!" Charles called after me, half rising from his chair. I turned slightly, catching his eye. The smallest shake of my head was enough. After 30 years of marriage, he understood. I wasn't retreating. I was repositioning. Instead of walking out the grand double doors, I headed to the back of the hall, where equipment and staff were partially hidden behind elegant screens. The wedding coordinator, who had been coolly professional with me throughout the planning process, looked surprised to see me approaching the service area. "Mrs. Parker, do you need something?" I ignored her, moving directly to the DJ booth, where a young man with a neatly trimmed beard was cueing the next songs for after the speeches. "I need to speak with you," I said quietly, sliding a folded $100 bill across his table. "And I need a favor." I explained what I wanted while extracting a small USB drive from my evening purse. His eyes widened as he understood, but the money, and perhaps the drama, convinced him. "You're the mother of the bride," he said with a small shrug. "If you want the microphone, it's your right." From this vantage point, I could see the entire reception unfolding. Lily had finished her speech, and was now cutting the cake with Anderson, both of them laughing as they posed for photographs. The perfect couple, embarking on their perfect life, built on a foundation of lies and stolen information. I waited until the cake had been served, until guests had settled back with coffee and dessert, until the moment felt right. Then I nodded to the DJ. The music faded. Spotlights that had been moving playfully across the dance floor suddenly converged on the small stage at the front of the room. The DJ's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the mother of the bride would like to say a few words." I walked behind the curtains, took the offered microphone, and stepped onto the stage. The lights blinded me momentarily, but as my eyes adjusted, I could see 200 faces turned toward me in surprise. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Lily looked shocked to see me on stage, her cake fork frozen halfway to her lips, her expression transforming from triumph to alarm in an instant. Anderson's practiced smile slipped, his eyes suddenly alert and calculating. "You all heard her version?" I began, my voice steady and clear through the professional sound system. "Now let me tell you mine." Silence fell over the hall, the kind of perfect quiet that comes only from collective anticipation. Even the servers paused in their duties, sensing the dramatic shift in the atmosphere. "My daughter spoke about gifts and equality," I continued, meeting the eyes of guests I'd known for decades, people who had watched Lily grow up, who had celebrated our family's successes. "Let me explain why we didn't give the house we had promised." On the large projection screen behind me, which had been showing a montage of Lily's childhood photos, the DJ brought up the contents of my USB drive. Confidential Parker Logistics documents found on Lily's laptop, highlighted sections showing where original content had been copied and modified. Gasps rippled through the audience as the evidence appeared, larger than life, for all to see. The second slide showed bank transfers from Weststream Holdings to an offshore account in Lily's name, dated to begin shortly after she met Anderson. "For those unfamiliar with business practices," I explained calmly, "this isn't just unethical, it's corporate crime, punishable by imprisonment." I gestured toward a discreet man in a gray suit seated at a side table, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Jameson from the Securities Commission has copies of all this documentation." Anderson's face had lost all color. He glanced toward the exit, clearly calculating his escape route, but noticed two men in suits, Parker Logistics security staff I'd stationed there earlier, discreetly blocking the path. "As for your announcement about your great international partnership," I continued, looking directly at Anderson, whose cockiness had evaporated like morning dew, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Parker Logistics has just been officially selected for the Asian contract. Weststream Holdings was disqualified due to irregularities." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall, swelling from whispers to open conversation. The couple's facade of success was collapsing in real time, their triumphant moment transformed into public humiliation. "Mom, stop this!" Lily shouted, standing up so quickly that her chair toppled backward, her face flushed with rage and embarrassment as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was unraveling thread by thread. I held up my hand, silencing her with a gesture that reminded everyone present who had raised whom. I maintained my composure on stage, drawing strength from decades of boardroom negotiations and difficult business decisions. My voice softened slightly, becoming more maternal than prosecutorial. "And if you're wondering about the house that was to be the wedding gift," I continued, as the room hung on my every word, "it's already in someone else's name." The screen changed to show a property transfer document, the legal language clearly visible to all. 3 days ago, we transferred the beachfront property to someone who has always respected this family and its values, my grandson, Luke. Cameras and eyes turned to Luke, Michael's 8-year-old son, who looked confused by the sudden attention. Wearing a child-sized tuxedo with a slightly crooked bow tie, he blinked at the adults, staring at him. "The house will remain in a trust until he turns 25, I explained. "A legacy for the next generation who, we hope, will understand the value of loyalty and honesty." I looked directly at Lily, whose makeup had begun to streak with angry tears. "This isn't about punishment, Lily. It's about protection. Protecting what your father and I built, what your brothers helped maintain, and what would have been yours too, had you chosen differently." Lily stormed furiously across the hall, the train of her gown catching on a chair leg and ripping with a sound that echoed in the increasingly quiet room. "You're ruining my wedding!" she screamed, trying to snatch the microphone from my hand. How could you do this to me? I stepped calmly away, maintaining my dignity. Your wedding was ruined the moment it was built on lies and betrayal. I didn't do this to you, Lily. You did this to yourself. Anderson, seeing his reputation and plans crumbling, tried to discreetly slip toward a side exit. One of the investors I'd invited, the CEO of a shipping company that had almost partnered with Weststream, blocked his path. Going somewhere, Reynolds? He asked loudly. Or whatever your name really is? Another guest, an important investor who sat on several corporate boards, stood and announced he was leaving. I've seen enough, he declared, buttoning his jacket with finality. Eleanor, Charles, we'll talk next week. Like dominoes, others followed his example. Within minutes, the luxurious hall began to empty. Tables of half-eaten cake and full champagne glasses stood abandoned as guests made hasty exits, unwilling to be associated with the scandal unfolding before them. I descended from the stage and walked to Charles, who received me with a silent embrace, his arms strong and sure around me. When I came down from the stage, I would later tell friends who asked how it felt. Charles smiled and whispered, "That was beautiful." And in that moment, despite everything, I felt peace. The day after, news spread through Boston's business circles like wildfire. Parker Logistics issued a formal statement announcing Lily's removal from the company and legal measures against the misuse of confidential information. Our stock price, far from falling as I'd feared, actually rose 2 points as investors appreciated our decisive handling of the crisis. I received a call from Lily around noon, her voice now hysterical rather than commanding. "You destroyed my life," she sobbed. "Anderson abandoned me. He left the hotel last night and isn't answering my calls." "He got what he wanted from you," I responded calmly, looking out my office window at the Boston skyline. Privileged information. When that didn't work, there was no reason for him to stay. Where will I live? What will I do? The entitled princess had vanished, replaced by a frightened young woman facing consequences for perhaps the first time. "You're a Parker," I answered, my voice firm but not unkind. "We don't raise victims. I'll transfer enough money for a modest apartment and 6 months of expenses. The rest is up to you." Meanwhile, Daniel's investigation continued, uncovering that Anderson had done the same at 2 other companies before, seducing people with access to privileged information, using the data for competitive advantage, then disappearing when things went south. Parker Logistics had simply been his most ambitious target with the biggest potential payoff. A week later, I received an unexpected call. Anderson's mother, from Connecticut. "I saw what happened," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "It's not the first time. I'm sorry for what my son did to your family." The conversation gave me a new perspective on how toxic patterns can perpetuate through generations, and my determination to break that cycle in my own family grew stronger with each passing day. 6 months later, the Parker mansion was animated with a birthday celebration, Charles turning 60. The dining room echoed with conversation and laughter as the whole family gathered around the table where so many decisions, arguments, and reconciliations had taken place over the years. Daniel and his husband discussed expanding the company's West Coast operations. Michael and his wife showed ultrasound pictures of their second child. And at the far end of the table sat an unexpected figure, Lily. After months of therapy, cautious reconciliation, and volunteer work, part of my conditions for helping her rebuild her life, she had been invited to family gatherings again. She was quieter now, more reflective, her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire, her flashy jewelry gone. There was no grand scene of forgiveness, no dramatic embraces, just small steps toward healing. Lily helped in the kitchen without being asked. She spoke politely with her brothers. She played board games with Luke, who didn't understand the complexity of what had happened, only that his aunt had been away and was now back. During dinner, Charles stood to make a toast, his glass of wine catching the light as he looked around at the faces of those he loved. "To family," he said simply, "to building something that lasts, to protecting what matters, and to second chances when they're earned." His eyes met mine across the table, filled with the wisdom that comes only from weathering storms together. And to Eleanor, who had the strength to do what was necessary when our family was threatened, the true backbone of everything we've built. Later, in the garden where spring flowers had given way to summer blooms, Lily and I had a moment alone. She twisted a plain silver ring on her finger, the diamonds and sapphires of her engagement ring long gone. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. "Did you know Anderson would abandon me as soon as your plan was exposed?" "I suspected," I admitted, watching a butterfly land briefly on a nearby rose. Men like him don't love people. They love what they can extract from them. She nodded slowly, absorbing this. How did you know you were right and I was wrong? She asked, her former arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. When you've lived as long as I have, I said, you learn that true power isn't in winning at any cost. It's in knowing when to fight, when to forgive, and when to give people the chance to learn from their mistakes. The final scene showed our family gathered for a photograph on the mansion's wide front steps. Not a perfect reconciliation. There was still tension, carefully maintained spaces, wounds still healing. But there was also hope, a fragile bridge being built across the chasm of betrayal. Luke approached me as we arranged ourselves for the picture, tugging gently on my sleeve. Grandma, thank you for trusting me with the house, even though I can't live there now. I smiled, touching my grandson's face affectionately, seeing in his eyes the future of everything Charles and I had built. Sometimes, the daughter you raised breaks your heart, I said softly, though not so softly that Lily couldn't hear from her position on the steps behind us. But the family you rebuild afterward can make it even stronger. As the photographer counted to 3, the expression on my face showed not the triumph of revenge, but the quiet peace of someone who had protected what mattered most, even when it meant making the hardest decisions a mother could face. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.